As an enthusiast of video games of all generations, over time I've developed preferences for how I like to play my games. Whether it's older consoles like the NES, Sega Genesis, PlayStation 2, or more modern consoles like the Switch or PS5, each console can output video signals in different ways. And the display you use can make a huge difference in your experience as well. That's why today I wanted to talk about my favorite way to play retro games, and why you may want to do the same. CRT TVs offer tons of advantages when it comes to retro gaming. From faster response times to your button presses, to the beautiful glow from that screen, and even the scan lines, which can make your bits look just a tad sharper and crispy. And contrary to popular belief, you don't need the perfect CRT to enjoy the benefits. You just need to know what you want, and know that almost no CRT is perfect. So why do I suggest picking up a CRT for retro gaming? Well, the first reason is that pretty much every console from the 6th generation and every generation before that were made to be played on them. Playing a retro console with lower output resolutions just looks awful running straight into a modern display, stretching it out, making it look disgusting. Sure, there are upscaling devices available, but even with those, you still have to deal with some other issues like input lag and other shortcomings. And while more expensive options like RetroTinks can give you a damn close recreation of CRT-like effects, those are pretty expensive and more of a luxury item for only the most hardcore of gamers. But if you look locally in places like online marketplaces, there's a good chance you can find an old CRT with at least composite inputs for a pretty cheap price, or maybe even free. And that's honestly a great way to play these old games. Even with composite, it's gonna look and respond better than it would plugged straight into a modern TV. The reasons I prefer to play my old consoles on CRTs vary. The number one issue that it solves for me is response time to my button presses, and the general display lag created on modern displays. CRTs are often just faster, and those few milliseconds that modern displays and upscalers can potentially add to these games can make all the difference in a retro title. On a CRT, I always make my jump, hit my target, and never fall down a pit. And if I do, I feel like it's my fault. Or these unfair Medusa heads, definitely their fault. But with the way modern TVs simply aren't made to properly handle these older signals, that lag means that I end up getting destroyed by lasers, missing my targets, and dying for reasons that aren't necessarily my doing. Now, you could probably adjust to this over time if you wanted to, but for myself and many others, we've come to expect the quick response from controller to screen, and we simply prefer the faster reaction when we're playing our old games. But it doesn't end there. I also just love the way different CRTs can make games look. I've acquired a few CRT TVs throughout the years in my hunt to find the perfect one for my needs. But there are tons of options out there, and what I suggest, if you're interested in getting one, is doing your own research and finding one that's right for your tastes. For me, size isn't really an issue. I have TVs in every size from 9 inches to 36 inches. I've narrowed my favorites down to 3, however. The first one I came to really love was the Toshiba 14AF43. This is a more recent purchase. Maybe 1 or 2 years ago I came across this thing while I was searching for a CRT with all of the inputs that I wanted. This thing accepts RF, composite, S-video, and component inputs, making it a great option for just about every console from the Atari era to the PS2 and even PS3. While RF and composite look pretty good on smaller screens like this one, it really shines with S-video and component. You're kind of getting the best of all worlds with a set like this. The smaller screen helps to make things look just a tad sharper to the eye while also hiding any imperfections. It also has a flat screen, if you'll notice. This is actually more important to note than I initially thought. Depending on what you prefer, you'll want to consider making a choice between hunting a flat-screened tube or a curved one. Since the flat screens came later, they usually have more input options, but the images can sometimes look a tad distorted when scrolling, and the geometry, particularly around the edges, can look a little bit off. This is because the beams in these TVs were really designed to shoot onto a curved edge, so just know if you want absolute perfect geometry, you may want to look at a curved screen. Although you probably won't notice any of these issues during normal gameplay anyway. And there are many minor ways to fix those issues and adjust it if you really want to dig into CRT repair. Another one of my favorite sets, and one that really shocked me, is this tiny Sansui, the COM0950A. It's a combo unit. It has a VHS player built in, which looks really cool even if I don't use it to watch many tapes. Of note, I don't suggest combo units unless you're sure they work. The VHS players can go bad pretty often, and that can cause the entire set to just turn off simply because the VHS player doesn't work. It's dumb, so be aware. But still, this 9-inch screen is perfect for older consoles. I have it set up on my editing desk, and I find that even though it only has RF and composite input, it looks great. Usually having sharpness turned up too much on these sets is a no-no, but I boosted it just a tad to kind of hide edges and define sprites, and it looks amazing when playing the NES, Super Nintendo, and Genesis. It's a curved screen, so the geometry looks great too, and the convergence is near perfect. The smaller screen really does these older consoles justice, and even though I have RGB and S-Video modded consoles, this smaller screen gives unmodded consoles in my collection their time to shine. There's a reason it's on my editing desk and easily accessible. I simply love everything about this set. And it's a great example of why preference is more important than listening to what everyone tells you is good or bad in the CRT market. If you want to play 8 and 16-bit consoles primarily, you can't go wrong with something smaller and convenient like this. But my most recent pickup, and one I've been after for quite a long time, is the 27-inch Sony KV27S42. The Sony Trinitron name is one you'll hear lots of people drop as the king of CRTs. And while I admit these sets, at least the ones I've seen in person, do look great, other sets like the JVC D series can do just as well as these, if not better in some cases. Still, my Trinitron here is a beast for all of my needs. And while it only comes with RF, composite, and S-Video inputs, I find it looks great through S-Video, especially with the Super Nintendo and the NES that I modded to have S-Video output. PS2 and PS1 also look fantastic, although admittedly I find myself fiddling with colors settings on darker screens. But again, that's a preference thing. The images, especially for a 27-inch screen, are surprisingly sharp through S-Video. And when I have an evening to myself, I find myself using this set the most to relive childhood memories of playing games into all hours of the night. This CRT in particular has really made me appreciate the PlayStation 2 era of consoles again. For the longest time in my head, I had images of blurry, unclear gameplay from this generation. Turns out a large part of that memory was trying to play it in the early days of the transition from CRTs to LED displays, and not realizing that it was a bad idea to ditch a CRT for modern TVs. That, and the fact that back in the day I didn't know the difference between RF, composite, component, or S-Video. I had no idea the quality differences. But I also feel like I need to point out the shortcomings of larger screens like this. If you're playing on an unmodded NES or a Genesis using only composite, you'll probably say the same thing I did. This looks like shit. And yeah, blowing up smaller images like this on composite inputs can create awful distortions. So again, it's about knowing what you want. Also, it tends to be really noticeable on larger screens like this that you'll have really bad convergence on the edges. Again, this is something you can adjust in a minor sense, but you probably won't notice it during normal gameplay. Also, this is absolutely my weight limit. I lifted this beast into my home alone, and it was not easy. Anything bigger than this is going to absolutely be a two-person job. And one other thing to note about this set, as well as quite a few others, is that it's moddable. You can actually install component inputs if you really want to, but I decided I was happy with S-Video, as the difference in sharpness isn't really much. Component can offer better color depth, but again, that's preference. And for me, well, I have the Toshiba we talked about, so if I really want to play with component input, I have that. So why did I make this video? Well, really just to say, do your research. Find the CRT that's right for you. Maybe learn how to fix and adjust them like I am. And most importantly, follow your wants and needs. Don't just go for the most sought after and expensive sets you can find just because someone says it's what you need. At the end of the day, any CRT can be a great CRT, you just have to know what you want to use it for. Unfortunately, CRTs have kind of become an enthusiast market recently, with quite a few people taking an elitist attitude towards it. But don't fret, and don't listen. It's about what you want after all. That's all for this one. I'll see you next time.